What if I told you that in 2025, Americans are facing the biggest travel crisis in decades? Borders closing, visas denied, trips canceled, and it's all being triggered by decisions in just 10 countries across the globe. Before we dive in, comment below and tell us where's the next country you want to visit. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on the latest travel updates and global news. 2025 was supposed to be the year travel bounced back. But instead, we're seeing a shocking collapse in American tourism abroad. New visa requirements, travel bans, and diplomatic tensions are making it harder than ever to explore the world. Today, we're counting down the 10 countries at the heart of this travel meltdown and what their actions mean for you. Starting off our list at number 10 is Brazil, a country that has long been a favorite destination for American travelers. From the vibrant energy of Rio's Carnival to the breathtaking views of the Amazon rainforest, Brazil offers experiences you can't find anywhere else. But in 2025, Brazil made a bold move that's now contributing to America's travel collapse. The government reinstated visa requirements for U.S. tourists, something we hadn't seen in years. Why the change? Officials in Brasilia called it diplomatic reciprocity. In other words, if the U.S. is going to make things tough for Brazilian travelers, Brazil is ready to return the favor. But the reasons go deeper. There's growing tension between the two countries over issues like Amazon deforestation, environmental sanctions, and agricultural trade disputes. Brazil is using tourism as one way to push back. So what does this mean for American travelers? You'll now need to apply for a visa weeks in advance, no more spontaneous trips. There's a $160 visa fee per person that adds up fast for families. You'll need to provide extra documents, proof of income, hotel reservations, and return flights. For many, that dream trip to Brazil just became more complicated, more expensive, and more stressful. Tour operators have already reported a 30% drop in U.S. bookings to Brazil, and some airlines are cutting back on flights as demand falls. In short, Brazil's decision is sending a clear message. Tourism is no longer just about vacations, it's becoming part of the diplomatic chess game. And for American travelers, that means fewer options and a lot more red tape. Coming in at number 9 is Japan, a destination known for its rich culture, futuristic cities, and stunning natural beauty. From Tokyo's neon streets to Kyoto's ancient temples, Japan has always been high on the list for American tourists. But in 2025, Japan introduced new entry rules for U.S. travelers that caught many by surprise. After decades of welcoming millions of American visitors, Japan is now making it harder to enter, and here's why. Japan cited a mix of reasons. Rising security concerns linked to global tensions, a response to diplomatic friction over trade, technology, and military cooperation, and growing pressure at home to prioritize tourists from other regions. So what's changed for Americans visiting Japan? New visa quotas limiting how many U.S. tourists can enter each month. Stricter background checks with longer application processes. Mandatory travel insurance and documentation proving sufficient funds. These changes mean that what used to be a quick and easy trip now requires weeks of planning and paperwork. Travel agencies report that U.S. bookings for Japan are down nearly 40% since these rules took effect. Meanwhile, Japan is ramping up efforts to attract tourists from other parts of Asia. It's a tough pill to swallow for travelers who dreamed of cherry blossoms in spring or skiing in Hokkaido, but it's the new reality in 2025. And like Brazil, Japan's shift shows that tourism is no longer separate from politics, it's right in the middle of it. At number 8, we have Turkey, a country that bridges Europe and Asia. Rich in history, culture, and breathtaking landscapes. From Istanbul's iconic skyline to the ancient ruins of Ephesus and the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia, Turkey has always attracted American adventurers and history buffs alike. But in 2025, Turkey tightened its borders for American tourists, making it one of the most challenging destinations to visit on this list. So, what's behind Turkey's decision? Rising military tensions and disagreements between the U.S. and Turkey over conflicts in the Middle East. Turkey's frustration with U.S. sanctions and arms restrictions, and a desire to assert greater sovereignty over its borders in response to growing regional instability. For American travelers, this shift has major consequences. Mandatory visas for all visitors from the U.S., with no exceptions. A complex online application system that often requires follow-up interviews at consulates. additional security screenings on arrival with reports of longer wait times and more frequent questioning at airports. And beyond just paperwork, there's been a noticeable change in atmosphere. Travelers describe a sense of unease and caution, where hospitality is still warm, but political tensions are impossible to ignore. The result? A steep decline in U.S. tourism to Turkey, with some estimates showing a drop of over 50% compared to previous years. Airlines and tour companies are scaling back their offerings as demand falls. Turkey's case is another example of how international politics can change the way we travel, turning dream destinations into diplomatic minefields for Americans in 2025. Coming in at number 7 is India, a land of incredible diversity, ancient traditions, and booming cities. For decades, India has been a top destination for Americans seeking everything from spiritual retreats to tech opportunities. But in 2025, India made headlines when it tightened visa rules for U.S. tourists, adding new layers of complexity for those hoping to visit. What triggered this shift? Diplomatic tensions over trade imbalances, especially in technology and pharmaceuticals. Concerns over cybersecurity and data privacy, with India accusing U.S. firms of unfair practices. And a growing push by India to prioritize regional partnerships over Western tourism. So what's changed for American visitors? In-person visa interviews are now mandatory even for short-term tourist visas. Travelers must submit detailed itineraries, proof of funds, and even references from Indian citizens or organizations. Processing times have doubled, with many applicants waiting up to 6 weeks for approval. These new requirements have caught many travelers off guard. Trips that used to take just a few clicks to plan now involve embassy visits, paperwork, and long waits. Tourism boards report that U.S. visits to India have dropped by nearly 35% since the new policies began. And as India pivots toward attracting visitors from neighboring countries, the door for spontaneous American adventures is closing fast. India's visa changes are another sign that in 2025, travel is no longer just about tourism. It's tied to trade, technology, and geopolitics in ways we've never seen before. At number 6, we have Russia, a country famous for its grand architecture, deep history, and vast, diverse landscapes. From the palaces of St. Petersburg to the Red Square in Moscow, Russia once drew thousands of curious American tourists each year. But in 2025, that flow of visitors came to a sudden halt. Russia took one of the most drastic steps on this list. It banned most American travelers outright. Why did this happen? Escalating diplomatic conflicts over military actions and global alliances. Sanctions and counter-sanctions that pushed relations to a breaking point. Russia's claim that the ban was necessary to protect national security interests in a time of rising tensions. What does this mean in practice? Tourist visas for Americans are nearly impossible to obtain. Most applications are automatically denied. Even business and cultural exchange visas have been slashed, leaving almost no legal pathways for Americans to visit. Those few who are granted entry face intensive security screenings, limited movement, and strict monitoring. The impact has been immediate and dramatic. Cultural tours, academic exchanges, and business trips have all but disappeared. Airlines have either suspended or severely reduced direct flights between the U.S. and Russia. Russia's case is perhaps the most extreme example of how politics and travel have collided in 2025. For now, the idea of an American sightseeing trip along the Trans-Siberian Railway or a visit to the Hermitage Museum. It's off the table, a stark reminder of how fragile global travel can be when diplomacy breaks down. Number 5 on our list is Saudi Arabia, a nation known for its desert landscapes, futuristic megacities, and rich cultural heritage. In recent years, Saudi Arabia worked hard to open its doors to global tourism as part of its Vision 2030 plan. But in 2025, American travelers found that door starting to close. Saudi Arabia introduced stricter visa rules and higher entry fees for U.S. citizens, shifting its focus toward visitors from other regions. So what caused this change? Growing political friction between Washington and Riyadh over energy policy and military cooperation. Frustration over U.S. criticism of Saudi domestic policies. And a move by Saudi leaders to diversify their tourism markets and reduce dependence on Western visitors. Here's how it's affecting Americans who want to visit. Visa fees have doubled, making travel to Saudi Arabia one of the most expensive options in the region for U.S. tourists. Visitors now face extra screening measures, including detailed background checks and financial disclosures. There are new restrictions on where tourists can go, with tighter controls on travel to certain cultural and religious sites. These changes have already made an impact. U.S. tour operators say interest in Saudi Arabia has dropped significantly, with some canceling group tours altogether. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is heavily marketing itself to travelers from Asia and the Middle East. For Americans, Saudi Arabia's evolving policies are yet another reminder that tourism is no longer just about leisure. It's deeply connected to international politics and shifting alliances in 2025. At number 4, we have China, a country that has long fascinated American travelers with its ancient wonders, modern megacities, and rich cultural traditions. From the Great Wall to the bustling streets of Shanghai, China was once a top destination for U.S. tourists. But in 2025, that changed dramatically. In response to growing tensions with the U.S., China introduced strict new visa controls and digital security checks that have made visiting the country harder than it's been in decades. What's driving these changes? Escalating trade wars and disputes over technology, cybersecurity, and intellectual property. Rising military tensions in the Asia-Pacific region. And a desire by China's government to tighten control over who enters its borders, especially from countries seen as rivals. So, what do these new policies look like for Americans? Visa applications now require detailed digital profiles, including social media history and travel records. Many applicants are being asked for in-person interviews at consulates, even for tourist visas. Processing times have tripled, with some travelers waiting months for approval if they're approved at all. These barriers have caused U.S. tourism to China to plummet. Tour operators are reporting huge drops in demand, and many business travelers are rethinking plans due to uncertainty over whether they'll even be allowed in. For now, that bucket list trip to the Forbidden City or a Yangtze River cruise feels out of reach for many Americans. Another example of how in 2025, travel is no longer just about exploring the world. It's caught up in the storm of global politics. Number 3 on our list might come as a surprise: Mexico, a neighbor, a close partner, and for many Americans, the number 1 destination for a quick getaway. Beaches, vibrant cities, ancient ruins. Mexico has always been a top choice for U.S. travelers. But in 2025, even Mexico began introducing tougher policies for American visitors. Why the sudden shift? Frustration over U.S. immigration policies that impacted Mexican citizens and border communities. Growing tensions over trade agreements and environmental concerns tied to cross-border industries. And a push by Mexico to send a message that respect has to go both ways. So what's changed for Americans heading south of the border? New entry fees and tourism taxes aimed specifically at foreign visitors, with Americans paying the highest rates. More frequent customs checks and secondary screenings at airports and land crossings. Reports of longer wait times and stricter enforcement at popular entry points, making even routine trips more stressful. These changes are already having an effect. Tourism officials report a noticeable decline in U.S. visitors to Mexico's top beach resorts and cultural sites. Meanwhile, Mexico is stepping up promotions aimed at attracting tourists from Europe, Asia, and South America. For American travelers, what was once the easiest international trip is now filled with new costs, longer lines, and more uncertainty. And it's yet another example of how in 2025 even our closest neighbors are reshaping their policies in response to political tensions. At number 2 is perhaps the most shocking entry on this list: Canada, America's closest ally, trading partner, and neighbor to the north. For decades, the U.S. and Canada have shared one of the easiest and friendliest travel relationships in the world. But in 2025, that relationship hit a bump in the road. For the first time in modern history, Canada introduced visa requirements for some U.S. travelers, sparking frustration and confusion on both sides of the border. So what happened? Ongoing disputes over climate and energy policy, especially oil pipelines and emissions targets. Tensions around border security, tech regulation, and cultural policy. And a growing sentiment among Canadian officials that the U.S. isn't holding up its end of bilateral agreements. As a result, Canada made some big changes. Certain U.S. travelers, including long-term visitors and repeat entrants, must now apply for electronic travel authorization, ETA, or even a full visa, depending on circumstances. New entry taxes and stricter enforcement of customs rules are being rolled out. Border agents now conduct deeper screenings, especially at land crossings. What was once a casual drive across the border to Niagara Falls or a weekend in Vancouver now requires planning, paperwork, and patience, especially for frequent travelers. Tourism experts say Canada is quietly shifting focus toward visitors from Europe and Asia looking to diversify its travel economy. It's a wake-up call for many Americans. If even Canada is tightening access, it shows how global travel in 2025 is being reshaped by policy, politics, and shifting alliances, not just geography. And finally, at number 1 on our list, the European Union, home to some of the world's most iconic destinations, from Paris to Rome, Barcelona to Amsterdam. For generations, Europe has been the ultimate travel dream for Americans, offering history, culture, food, and adventure at every turn. But in 2025, that dream became harder to reach. In a historic shift, the EU introduced a new visa system for U.S. tourists, turning what was once a hassle-free trip into a bureaucratic process. Why the change? Ongoing trade disputes and diplomatic tensions between the U.S. and the EU over tariffs, data privacy, and environmental commitments. Frustration within Europe over U.S. visa policies that make travel harder for some EU citizens. And rising security concerns amid global instability. So what does this mean for American travelers? You now need to apply for a Schengen visa or electronic travel authorization (ESHAs) depending on the country and duration of stay. Expect higher fees and longer wait times for approvals. What once took minutes now can take weeks. Travelers are asked for detailed travel plans, proof of insurance, and even financial statements before setting foot in Europe. The result? A sharp decline in spontaneous trips to Europe. Travel agencies report that Americans are rethinking vacations as costs and paperwork pile up. Airlines are adjusting routes as demand from the U.S. drops, and Europe is actively courting visitors from Asia and other regions. The European Union's decision is the final piece in a troubling puzzle, showing how in 2025, travel is no longer just about where you want to go. It's about navigating a world where politics shapes the borders of your next adventure. And that wraps up our list of the 10 countries triggering America's travel collapse in 2025. So, which of these countries surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with fellow travelers. The world of travel is changing fast, but together we can stay informed and prepared. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.